Once upon a time, in a city not far from your own, on a frigid and frosty New Year's Eve, a little girl walked through the frozen streets, shivering and alone. Clad only in rags, cotton slippers, and a tattered old shawl, she roamed the boulevards and walkways with a fistful of matches to sell. If she could sell enough, perhaps she could pay for an evening in a doss house. It wouldn't be luxurious, but it would be dry and provide a little respite from the cold. She tried earnestly to sell her matches, but all of the townsfolk wrapped in their mittens and scarves passed her by. They were too focused on themselves to notice the dirty, suffering child. As the night grew colder and darker, she cowered in a corner, trying to keep warm. In an attempt to find a moment of relief, the little girl struck one of the matches and gazed into the orange glow. As she stared at the glistening light, a beautiful vision of a Christmas feast appeared before her. A table laden with meat, vegetables, and sweet treats blossomed before her eyes. The vision was so real, so visceral, she could smell the food and feel the warmth of the crackling fire. But as soon as the match died out, so did the vision. Eager to see the sight again, the little girl struck yet another match. Before her eyes came the beautiful image of a Christmas tree, glittering and glowing, trimmed with candles, dainty glass ornaments, candy canes, and feathery angels. As she stared, the tree appeared to grow, rising higher and higher into the sky. Yet, once the match burned out, the tree vanished. Match after match the little girl burned. Beautiful images of toys, candy, gingerbread, and nutcrackers danced before her eyes. Finally, she lit the very last match. In the golden glow, the little girl's grandmother appeared. This was the most magical vision of all, as her grandmother had sadly passed, and the little girl missed her terribly. Gingerly, the grandmother wrapped her arms around the frozen child, and together they flew to a land of warmth, comfort, food, and safety. There was no more fear, pain, hunger, or sadness. The next morning, on New Year's Day, the townsfolk discovered the little girl, frozen to death on the streets that they had passed her by on the night before. In her hand was a single burned-out match. Hey friends, it's Becca. For the past 5 years, the West London Witch team has been dedicated to bringing you the best supernatural stories at the highest studio quality. And by team, I mean me and my buddy Danny. We do this work totally for free because we love it. We're proud of our content and appreciate the wonderful interactions we get to have with storytellers and listeners just like yourself. If you're enjoying the West London Witch, maybe consider joining our Patreon. It's a way to further engage with us and show your support for two creatives. If you're in a position to spare enough each month for us to grab a cup of coffee in between edits or add to the piggy bank for a new microphone, we would love to see you in our Patreon community. But I know times are tough, so if you're not in a position to join Patreon right now, that's okay. We aren't going anywhere. Head on over to patreon.com/The West London Witch. For as little as £1, $1, €1 a month, you can gain full access to our coven, a space where we share behind-the-scenes stories, dive deeper into each episode, answer your questions, and have special little treats to thank you for sharing your love and kindness with your favorite little witch. Happy Christmas and welcome to episode 104 of The West London Witch, a podcast where we share stories about those moments where we find ourselves very much not alone. Season greetings, my friends. When I think of Christmas time, I am enveloped by images of candy canes, gingerbread, chocolate kisses, and stories of good little girls and boys in faraway lands. Now, I am a millennial who grew up in the golden age of Disney musicals. My childhood bedroom was Beauty and the Beast themed. I had Lion King, Pocahontas, and Esmeralda birthday parties. Aladdin was my first cassette tape, and the Disney store outfitted my closet. I grew up on a steady diet of sparkling soundtracks, glittering tiaras, and happily ever after. But as you know, all of these stories are based off of much older tales that were not necessarily designed for children. This Christmas, we will be stepping into the fairy forest, but it won't be all sugar plums and wishing stars. Today, Pauline Greenhill, professor of Women and Gender Studies at the University of Winnipeg, Canada, will be guiding us through the dark and gory corners of some of our favorite and lesser-known fairy tales. Professor Greenhill is an esteemed author and folklorist who has contributed significantly to contemporary folklore studies. So, gather up your cloaks around you, light your lanterns, and keep your wits about you as we journey over the river and through the woods. To Grandmother's house we go. I'm Rebecca Strazina, and this is The West London Witch, episode 104, The Juniper Tree.
Long ago, there was a rich man who had a beautiful and pious wife, and they loved each other dearly. However, they had no children, though they wished very much to have some. And the woman prayed for them day and night, but they didn't get any. In front of their house, there was a courtyard where there stood a juniper tree. One day in winter, the woman was standing beneath it, peeling herself an apple, and she cut her finger, and the blood fell into the snow.
"Oh," said the woman, "if only I had a child that was as red as blood and white as snow."
And as she said that, she became quite contented and felt sure that it was going to happen. A month went by and the snow was gone, and 2 months and everything was green, and 3 months and all the flowers came out of the earth, and 4 months and all the trees in the woods grew thicker, and the green branches were all entwined with one another, and the birds sang until the woods resounded and the blossoms fell from the trees. Then the 5th month passed, and she stood beneath the juniper tree, which smelled so sweet that her heart jumped for joy, and she fell on her knees and was beside herself. And when the 6th month was over, the fruit was thick and large. And after the 7th month, she picked the juniper berries and ate them greedily. Then she grew sick and sorrowful. Then the 8th month passed, and she called her husband to her and cried and said, "If I die, then bury me beneath the juniper tree." When the next month was over, she had a child as white as snow and as red as blood. and when she saw it, she was so happy that she died.
Her husband buried her beneath the juniper tree and began to cry bitterly. Yet after some time, he became more at ease, and some time later, he took another wife.
He had a daughter by the second wife, but the first wife's child was a little son. When the woman looked at her daughter, she loved her very much. But then she looked at the little boy, and it pierced her heart, for she was always thinking how she could get the entire inheritance for her daughter. And the evil one filled her mind with this until she grew very angry with the little boy. And she pushed him from one corner to the other and slapped him here and cuffed him there until the poor child was always afraid.
One afternoon, her little daughter Marlene said, "Mother, give me an apple, please." "Yes, my child," said the woman, and she gave her a beautiful apple out of a chest with a large, heavy lid and a gleaming, sharp iron lock.
"Mother," said the little daughter, "is brother not to have one too?" This made the woman angry, but she said, "Yes, when he comes home from school." When from the window she saw him coming, the evil one made her say to him kindly, "My son, do you want an apple?" "Yes, mother," said the little boy.
"Come with me," she said, opening the lid of the chest. "Take out an apple for yourself." While the little boy was leaning over, the evil one prompted her, and crash! She slammed down the lid, and the little boy's head flew off, falling among the trove of ruby-red apples.
Then she thought, maybe I can get out of this. So she took a white scarf and set the head on the neck again, tying the scarf around it. Then she set him on a chair in front of the door and put the apple in his hand. After this, Marlene came into the kitchen to her mother. "Mother," said Marlene, "brother is sitting at the door, and he looks totally white and has an apple in his hand. I asked him to give me the apple, but he did not answer me, and I was very frightened." "Go back to him," said the mother, "and if he will not answer you, then box his ears."
So the little girl returned to her brother and cried, "Brother, give me that apple." But he was silent. So, doing as she was told, she gave him a swift box across the ear. As her hand came away, so did the little boy's head, tumbling to the floor.
Marlene was terrified and ran to her mother and said, "Oh, mother, I have knocked my brother's head off." And she cried and could not be comforted. "Marlene," said the mother, "what have you done? Be quiet and don't let anyone know about it. It cannot be helped now." Then the mother took the little boy and chopped him in pieces, put him into the pot, and cooked him into stew. But Marlene stood by crying, and all her tears fell into the pot, and they did not need any salt. Then the father came home and sat down at the table, and the mother served up a large dish of stew.
As the father sat with his stew before him, he asked, "Where is my son?" "Oh," said the mother, "he has journeyed across the country to his mother's great-uncle's house. He will stay there for a while. There's nothing to worry about." "What is he doing there?" the father asked. "He didn't even say goodbye. That's not like him." "Oh, well, he did ask me, and I gave him permission. He said he would be gone for 6 weeks. "I am most disappointed," said the father, his spoon hitting the table with a smack. "He should have said goodbye."
With that, he began to eat, saying, "Wife, this food is delicious. Give me some more." And the more he ate, the more he wanted. And he said, "Give me some more." You two shall have none of it. It seems to me as if it were all mine." And he ate and ate, throwing all the bones under the table until he had finished it all. Marlene gathered the bones from beneath the table and tied them up in her best silk scarf, then carried them outside the door, crying tears of blood. She laid them down beneath the juniper tree, and after she had put them there, she suddenly felt better and did not cry anymore. Then the juniper tree began to move. At the same time, a mist seemed to rise from the tree, and in the center of this mist it burned like fire, and a beautiful bird flew out of the fire singing magnificently. And it flew high into the air, and when it was gone, the juniper tree was just as it had been before, and the cloth with the bones was no longer there. Marlene, however, was as happy and contented as if her brother were still alive, and she went merrily into the house, sat down at the table, and ate. Then the bird flew away and lit on a goldsmith's house and began to sing.
My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, and laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I.
The goldsmith was sitting in his workshop making a golden chain, and when he heard the bird singing, he had his leather apron on, and in one hand he had a golden chain, and in the other his tongs. He said to the bird, "How beautifully you can sing! Sing that piece again for me." "No," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. Give me the golden chain, and then I will sing it again for you." The goldsmith said, "Here is the golden chain for you. Now sing that song again for me." Then the bird came and took the golden chain in his right claw and sang the song again.
Next, the bird flew away to a shoemaker and lit on his roof and sang, My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, and laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I.
Hearing this, the shoemaker ran out of doors in his shirt sleeves. "Bird," said he, "how beautifully you can sing." And he looked at the bird and saw how beautiful he was, and what fine red and green feathers he had, and how his neck was like pure gold, and how his eyes shone like stars in his head. "Bird," said the shoemaker, "now sing that song again for me." "No," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. You must give me something." So the shoemaker took a pair of red shoes from the top shelf. "There, bird," said the man, "now sing that piece again for me." Then the bird took the shoes in his left claw and sang. When he had finished his song, he flew away. In his right claw he had the chain, and his left one the shoes. He flew far away to a mill and sat on a linden tree and sang.
My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, and laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I.
The miller came out and said, "Bird," said he, "how beautifully you sing. Sing it once more for me." "No," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. Give me the millstone, and then I will sing it again." "Yes," he said, "you should have it."
Then the miller and his 20 apprentices took a beam and lifted the millstone up. The bird stuck his neck through the hole and put it on as though he were wearing a collar. And then he repeated his song. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I.
When he was finished, he spread his wings, and in his right claw he had the chain, and in his left one the shoes, and around his neck the millstone. He flew far away to his father's house. The father, the mother, and Marlene were sitting at the table. The father said, "I feel so contented. I am so happy." "Not I," said the mother. "I feel uneasy, just as if a bad storm were coming." But Marlene just sat and cried and cried. Then the bird flew up, and it seated itself on the roof. The father said, "Oh, I feel so truly happy, and the sun is shining so beautifully about outside." Then the bird flew up, and as it seated itself on the roof, the father said, "Oh, I feel so truly happy, and the sun is shining so beautifully outside. I feel as if I were about to see some old acquaintance again." "Not I," said the woman. "I am so afraid that my teeth are chattering, and I feel like I have fire in my veins." Marlene sat in a corner crying. She held a handkerchief before her eyes and cried until it was wet through. Then the bird seated itself on the juniper tree and sang.
Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. Oh my, said the father. That is a beautiful bird. He is singing so sweetly, and the sun is shining so brightly. I think I'll go out and join him.
"Oh, don't go," said the woman. "I feel as if the whole house were shaking and on fire." But the man went out. With this, the bird dropped the golden chain, and it fell right around the man's neck, so exactly around that it fit beautifully. Then the man went in and said, "Just look what the beautiful bird has given me. What a beautiful golden chain he has given me, and how nice it looks."
Oh, said Marlene. I too shall go out and see if the bird will give me something. The bird threw down the red shoes, and Marlene excitedly placed them upon her feet. She ran into the home, dancing and leaping with joy.
"Oh," she said, "I was so sad when I went out, and now I am contented. That is a splendid bird. He has given me a pair of red shoes." "Now," said the woman, jumping to her feet, and with her hair standing up like flames of fire, "I feel as if the world were coming to an end. I too will go out and see if it makes me feel better."
And as she went out the door, there came an almighty crash. The little bird threw the millstone down on her head, and the mother was crushed to death.
The father and Marlene heard it and went out. Smoke, flames, and fire were rising from the place, and when that was over, the little brother was standing there.
Together, the son, sister, and father joined hands, returned to the home, sat at the table, and ate.
That was a version of the international folktale, The Juniper Tree. And it is known in over 50 linguistic and cultural groups. Every traditional fairy tale telling, no matter what medium it is a copy with no original. I like to think of every version as a snapshot, a kind of view of that story in time and space that refers to its sources and its predecessors. But being faithful to an original is not really the point of folktales.
Although readers, listeners, and storytellers may associate the first version of the story they encounter as the authentic text, there is not a defined, definitive original for any folk story. And even more interesting, there is not an original model for understanding fairy tales.
Fairy tales are important because they speak with, as well as about their tellers, audiences, contexts of performance, and sociocultural backgrounds. And I think of them as offering different visions. And there's lots of visions in the Juniper Tree. The well-known fairy tale scholar Maria Tatar calls the Juniper Tree probably the most shocking of all fairy tales. And it always surprises me that she singles it out despite her inventory of the Grimm's tales as being murder, mutilation, cannibalism, infanticide, and incest. And we definitely have the first four of those: murder, mutilation, cannibalism, and infanticide. Perhaps not incest, but if you count the cannibalism of one's own son, a kind of incest-like act, it does kind of seem a bit like incest.
There is no doubt that the Juniper Tree is a very brutal tale. I had never heard of it before Pauline introduced me to it, nor had any of my friends or family. We are all prolific readers and lover of folklore, but perhaps my fairy tale education has been predominantly driven by none other than Mickey Mouse.
And because we all think of fairy tales as being turned into animated Disney versions, I really want to see the Disney version of the Juniper Tree. I challenge anyone at Disney to do a version of the Juniper Tree that's going to fit their culture and their ethos. It is pretty obvious that Disney picks some very specific tales for their animated and live action features. And there are actually a couple of pretty well-known fairy tales that never got Disneyfied. And perhaps not surprisingly, that would be a tale like Hansel and Gretel or like Little Red Riding Hood. And of course, in Hansel and Gretel, we again have a murderous mother. We have parents who are not taking proper care of their children. We have a cannibalistic witch. And we have definitely bad things happening to children. So I kind of wonder how Disney would get around that one. And Little Red Riding Hood is another example. There actually is a very early Disney cartoon of Little Red Riding Hood, a short black and white. It is wacky as all get out, but he has not made an animated feature film with Little Red Riding Hood.
Now, I am no fairy tale scholar or folklorist, but I do teach theater and dance, and I have worked on many a production of both Hansel and Gretel and Little Red Riding Hood. And I have always struggled with both of these texts. Predominantly because the moral of the story and the super objective is a bit muddy. When I look at Hansel and Gretel, I see a tale of two abandoned children who are intentionally left in the forest to die by their parents. And yet, at the end of the tale, after they escape the witch and are reunited with their neglectful adults, there is not any condemnation for the blatant parental betrayal. They all just live happily ever after. Additionally, when the witch catches the children eating her house and then proceeds to lock them up, she is considered wicked, even though there are literally two children destroying her property. She didn't bewitch them. She didn't lure them to the house. They ate the house on their own volition. I too would be upset if I found children consuming my window panes and gnawing on my front door. I feel for the witch. Sure, hunger, poverty, and neglect are very real problems, but casting the witch as the villain is an oversimplified explanation of evil. She's not the problem. The real issue is the world, the society, and the home that these children come from. Frankly, there is a lack of virtue altogether in this story. Hansel and Gretel do not escape due to their moral fortitude, but rather due to their cleverness and their ability to deceive. And once they have escaped and cooked the poor witch, they steal her jewels and gold and run back to their parents. The story condemns greed in one character, but rewards it for others. There is no clear and consistent standard of accountability. And that makes it really difficult to teach to children. I love the story, but I hate working on it with kids because it feels morally confused. And we expect children's stories to have clear, instructive, distilled lessons that are consumable and consistent. And Little Red Riding Hood is equally difficult to understand when you really look at what ethical or moral tale we are trying to pull from it.
And again, we have some pretty nasty things happening in Little Red Riding Hood. And many people have argued that it is a story about rape, that it's a story about assault against an older woman and a younger woman, and if not actual assault, attempted assault. And some of the final endings in Little Red Riding Hood, traditional versions, do not have what the Grimms have, which is a woodsman coming in and saving the grandmother and cutting open the wolf, and the little kid and the grandmother jump out and they're totally fine. There is one version in which the wolf eats Little Red Riding Hood, and that's the end. Bye-bye, Little Red Riding Hood. And there is another version which particularly interests me as a feminist, in which Little Red Riding Hood escapes, and she comes to a river when she's running away from the wolf. The wolf is chasing her, and she sees some washerwomen across the river, and they throw some of the washing over to Little Red Riding Hood and pull her across the river to safety. So when the wolf comes along, he says to the washerwomen, "Oh, you pulled Little Red Riding Hood over. Maybe you want to pull me over too." And so they throw across the washing. And when the wolf is in the middle of the river, they let go. And that's the end of him. Again, kind of hard to make into a happy little story about princesses and princes and marriage.
Disney may not have covered Hansel and Gretel or Little Red Riding Hood yet, but there are many fairy tales that they have adapted and sanitized.
In many versions of the story of Rapunzel, for example, Rapunzel is pregnant. She's met up with the guy she's pulled up into the tower, and one thing has led to another. That doesn't go into a Disney version of the fairy tale. And there are often incredibly gruesome punishments for evildoers. So in some versions of Snow White, the evil queen has to dance herself to death in red-hot slippers. And also, the princess actually disenchants the frog in some versions of The Princess and the Frog when she gets angry with him and frustrated, and she throws him against the wall. So she's intending to kill him, but he turns into a prince, and it's all good.
To Disney's credit, they are really good at injecting morals into their retellings of these classic tales. But not all fairy tales were built as cautionary tales.
So if you think about the juniper tree, what lessons could we take from this? Don't be so happy when you give birth, because if you're too happy, you're going to die. It's a bad idea to kill your stepson, because if that happens, somebody's going to murder you too. I don't think it's easy to find an obvious moral for the juniper tree. It's it's a crazy story. It's a story that is scary and has all kinds of bad things happening. But I don't think it's there to let people know that there are certain things that they should and shouldn't do. That's actually true of quite a lot of fairy tales. I don't think that they teach as many lessons as people think. I think people think of fairy tales as stories for children. They're stories for adults too. No question, the juniper tree is a story for adults, but children love horror too. So it is something that was definitely communicated to children. And even if they weren't actually supposed to be hearing the stories, sometimes in traditional storytelling circumstances, after dark, the children have been sent to bed, and that's when the spooky stories come out. But the kids are still listening at the door, so they still want to hear what's going on. And the juniper tree is for gloomy little children who like scary stories, and there are lots of them.
Although the juniper tree does not have a clear moral message, it does have a very clear structure that it shares with many other fellow fairy tales.
I'm sure you will have noticed that some of the aspects of the story repeat. Red as blood, white as snow, the song, and other aspects of the story that sound a little bit familiar from fairy tales that you may have heard before. So, for example, the little phrase, red as blood and white as snow, you might think, oh, well, that's stolen from Snow White. But in fact, these kinds of motifs, red as blood, white as snow, and others, move from tale to tale, and they get picked and chosen and reused in different locations, fitting to whatever story it is that the person is telling. I'm sure that anyone who's listening to this would have noticed that this also follows a theme in fairy tales and folk tales where something really bad happens to the mother. Something really bad happens to the biological mother right at the beginning. She dies of happiness. And of course, the stepmother is also killed at the end by having a millstone dropped on her. This is certainly a theme that happens in a lot of folk tales and fairy tales, and certainly also in Disney films, whether they're based on fairy tales or not. Um, Mothers seem to have to be killed off at the beginning so things can happen.
Dead mothers are a very real running theme in fairy tales, and especially Disney movies. Bambi, Cinderella, Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, Lilo and Stitch, Finding Nemo, and Fox and the Hound are just a few movies where the mothers meet early or tragic ends. This is effective because mothers dying right at the top of the story creates a fast, emotional connection and sympathy for the budding protagonist. It instantly raises the emotional stakes and makes the protagonist grow up quickly, making them independent and noticeably othered. It makes space for individual self-realization, which is a very common theme in Disney movies. I also cannot let this moment pass without recognizing Walt Disney's personal family history. In 1938, when Walt was 36 years old, his mother tragically passed due to a gas leak in their North Hollywood home, a home that Walt had purchased for his parents. Film and literary scholars have noticed that after 1938, the pattern of mothers dying early, their deaths being quickly passed over, and stories rapidly moving past the grief could be due to his own unresolved guilt, sadness, and trauma. This is just a theory, as direct causation cannot be proven. But to me, there is something so striking about the man who popularized and immortalized so many fairy tales, living a life that reflected some of their most enduring themes. But before Disney tried his hand at fairy tales, it was the Brothers Grimm who ruled over the world of folklore.
Interestingly enough, the Grimms didn't believe that biomothers could ever be mean and nasty. So in many of their stories, they changed the tale villain figure to stepmothers from mothers. But for example, in Hansel and Gretel, often it's the biological mother, not the stepmother. And the Grimms and Disney make stepmothers witches. And in many live action versions of Hansel and Gretel, for example, the same actor plays the stepmother and the witch, which really kind of underscores that they are both evil characters and that they are in some way the same person. Stepmothers and witches get punished with very gruesome deaths, even in Disney. And I have to say, my personal hate number one is when Ursula in The Little Mermaid gets phallically impaled by the mast of a ship, and we're supposed to be all happy about it. But even biomothers get bad things happening to them in the Grimms. So wishing for a child can result either in dying or sometimes in getting a child who is something other than a conventional human. So there's a story called Hans my Hedgehog, in which the mother and father unwisely wish for a child, even if it were as ugly as a hedgehog. Well, of course, actually, hedgehogs are extremely cute, but the child that they have has a hedgehog upper body and a human lower body. Great story.
But as wicked and evil as mothers can be in fairy tales, their male counterparts do not seem to suffer the same critiques.
It's interesting to me, though, that fathers tend to be blameless. So even in the Juniper Tree, he greedily eats his own son and is rewarded with a gold chain, which I like to think of as first prize in an eating contest. In Hansel and Gretel, he is often the one who takes the kids out and abandons them in the woods. It's his wife who told him to do that, but he's the one who does it. But again, at the end of every version of Hansel and Gretel that I know, the kids go back, they take the witch's gold, and so the father is rewarded again, as he is in the Juniper Tree, with gold.
There's absolutely no doubt that fairy tales are not as simple or tidy as they may initially present. These are stories for everyone, not just children. Most of the time, not for children at all. But they endure because these spooky, gruesome, dark tales explore our own fears, desires, moral failings, and triumphs. When I asked Pauline what we should take away from these stories, she gave me a truly unexpected answer. As a professor, I was expecting her to give me a very academic, or perhaps purist view of the work. But instead, she told me to own the stories, to make them your own. Make them reflect the world around you. Make them fit your life, your dreams, your understanding of the world. And as you sit around your fireplace this Christmas, basking in the twinkling glow of the Christmas lights, sharing scary ghost stories and tales of the glories from Christmases long, long ago, I urge you to share a story in the way that you want it to be told. Thank you for spending your Christmas Eve with me and the incredible Professor Pauline Greenhill. Pauline has a wealth of work for free on open access. Cuddle up this Christmas and dive into justice in the 21st century, fairy tales and the power of wonder. Or fall into Pauline's book, Fairy Tale Films, for a deep dive into cinematic portrayals of your favorite fairy stories. And don't forget to check out the West London Witch Patreon for an extra special Coven conversation featuring more of my conversation with Pauline, as well as some extra special Christmas treats from the professor herself. If you're not a Patreon member, why not treat yourself to a Christmas present? I would love to see new friends in our little coven. Before I leave you to your last-minute wrapping, cookie baking, and merriment making, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you, our amazing listeners. Your constant support of this show truly fills me with endless joy and gratitude. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. From all of us here at the West London Witch, I wish you nothing but blessings of abundance, happiness, and good health in 2026. Until next year, merry meet, merry part, and a very Merry Christmas. Do you have a spooky story you'd like to share? I'd love to hear it. Drop me an email at thewestlondonwitch@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at The West London Witch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And come and follow us for additional content on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. The West London Witch is created by me, Rebecca Strazina. Our sound designer and production magician is the incredible Danny Cross. Our theme music was bespokely written and performed by the wickedly talented Kyle Hall. Our cover art is the beautiful collaboration between Lizzie Wilson and Jake Bowser. Special thanks to Miss Sinead Bowers, our quality control and biggest cheerleader. And thank you to you, all of our listeners all over the world. These are your stories. Thank you for sharing them with us.